Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. So, I am not a techie like some of the people here, but I at least do know what I need to do when it comes to accessing the deep web. That said, I don't go digging for creepy stuff, and I don't ever go for anything illegal. On the deep web, there is a lot of content that is just slightly too raunchy for the surface web and isn't posted for the masses. A good number of deep web sites don't even crack into the illegal category. That's basically the main difference between the dark web and the deep web. A lot of what I know on the deep web is people talking bullshit about random things: politics, modern science, technology, cryptids, and other supernatural stuff, as well as conspiracy theories. Some of those conspiracy theories can get really freaking weird. In fact, that's kind of what my story here is about. So, one of the sites that I would use a lot was a discussion board for conspiracy theories and craziness about how there were demons among us that were going to take over the world. A lot of it sounded like insane people rambling off scripts that you would find in the trash bin at the Sci-Fi Channel headquarters. But some of it was interesting, and all the theories there had their ardent followers. The people that seemed to run most of the theories were those that genuinely believed that our governments around the world were run by demons that sacrificed children to drink their blood. Like, seriously, crazy stuff. I remember that there was one user that was seriously crazy about this theory. I think his name was something like Devil's Home or something. I remember it being something about Dave and home, so I'm just going to call him Dave. Dave would post on every single thread that he could find, and he would egg on the initial poster to the point that he was almost rewriting their theories. What's worse is he seemed to believe in every single crazy theory that was posted. A government run by baby-eating demons? Yep. Totally true. Same government, somehow being run by space-faring lizard people. Also, just as true. Disney, seeking subtle hints into their kids' movies to get everyone hooked on cocaine. Sure, why the hell not? It was as if this guy refused to see reality for what was in front of his eyes. Everything had a hidden agenda. Everything was some plot to control the masses. And everything was worth questioning. I don't think Dave could have made a cup of coffee without accusing the coffee maker of trying to take away his God-given freedoms. Anyways, as quickly as I saw Dave make a new post on the forum, I noticed that he had almost entirely disappeared. I went over to his profile to see what he had posted lately, only to find that he had made a final thread called "Don't Trust the Admin." This thread outlined that the admins of the forum site were attempting to find him so that they could send a hitman to take him out of the picture. It had a ton of seemingly irrelevant details and included pictures of random people that Dave claimed were following him for the admins. He then rounded the whole thing out with an onion link to a website that he had created so that he could continue on with his ramblings. I went over to his website and read all of his posts, and they legitimately just kept getting crazier and crazier. Eventually, I'd had enough of his absolute craziness, and I decided to log off for a while. I kind of stopped getting on the deep web for a little bit, mostly because I really didn't have time. and I was feeling the stress of my first year in college. After a while, I think it was a couple of months between my last check, I decided that I wanted to get on and see what all Dave had gotten up to. I went back to the forum, went to his account, and then to his personal site or blog, only to find that there were over 300 new updates. This man had seriously posted over 300 times within maybe a month and a half at most. And I started down the rabbit hole of his post, and his theories started getting really abstract. Some of them made some sense, like he would have clear moments in the crazy fog, but a lot of them were things like, the Russian government is watching you with a satellite that comes around every week, and how meat that you buy at the store isn't really meat, but a plasticine-like material that was synthesized, and that it contained hormones to make people dumb. It was all honest-to-God insanity. Then I got to the end of the feed, and I felt bad for laughing at his post. His last post was simply titled, "I can't do it anymore." It was probably the most lucid thing that he had written on the page. It explained that his mother had passed away from cancer. Of course, he blamed Big Pharma for this, but then went on to explain that the stress of life was too much for him and he couldn't keep up. He outlined some of his theories about the government running our lives and explained that if he couldn't live free, then he wouldn't live at all. He finished off the post saying, "To all my friends that have helped me to see clearly over the years, I thank you, and may God bless you all." Then, he posted a picture of a hand holding a pistol of some sort. There was nothing after this post, and the few comments that existed were just people saying that God would understand his decision and that he was truly a soldier fighting for the truth. Obviously, this was pretty depressing, and I was a bit freaked out knowing that this guy that I was making fun of in my head was most likely not alive and was also most likely dealing with mental health issues. In the end, I didn't really go back or spend any time on the deep web. Dave's story had a bit of a lasting effect on me and taught me a lesson about sympathy.
You've Googled yourself at some point or another. Admit it. There's nothing shameful about it, but it's not worse than what I did. I searched my name on the dark web. Don't ever make that same mistake. Now let's get to it. I was 19 years old then. Liv, my girlfriend, and her family were kind enough to let me live in their guest bedroom at the start of the year. They liked the fact that I could fix most of their computer problems. Liv was a great person, and what she saw in a hacker who could never survive for long in the 9-to-5 world is beyond me. Their house was in a suburb only a few blocks away from a library and coffee shop with free Wi-Fi. These locations were convenient for what I did. I used those resources until I was able to move out and get a small apartment of my own. After a string of demeaning jobs and abusive bosses, I found financial independence. I did this after I learned how to buy and sell things I shouldn't have with the use of my Tor browser. I engaged in illegal transactions such as ordering counterfeit money and stolen IDs. I discovered there was a market for manufactured psychedelics. I often went to the skate park to sell these things off, so business was good. A young man with years spent in foster care, I sought out activities which gave me a sense of control. A childhood of not having any would do that to you. The ability to navigate an online world to get almost whatever I wanted afforded me a sense of power. It was all going well until one evening in July. I sat on the second level of Barnes & Noble bookstore on a corner next to the self-help section. I always did my best work there. The place was starting to go under, and I did not have to worry about an influx of patrons. Despite having a disguised IP address, I never wanted to risk a raid at home. The items were always shipped to a P.O. box instead of my unit number. In retrospect, these were all flimsy safety measures. They still gave me a sense of comfort, even if they were a tad delusional. I made sure there weren't any cameras mounted near where I sat. It was a small space out of the way of the general public. Hiding in plain sight was always my preferred method. I drank strong coffee out of an oversized styrofoam cup. After 15 minutes of searching, I grew bored. I typed in my name, Joshua Wells. An input of my identity on the part of the web should be an indicator of how successful and arrogant I had become. I did not expect Wikipedia to be among the results, but it was the third link down. The first one involved a ghost tour in New Jersey. The guide had a similar name. The second was a gore website I was not interested in. While I may have been a thrill seeker, I was not out to consume media which capitalized on hurting others. I clicked on the third article link because of the title. It was about a television show. It read, The Short Life of Joshua Wells. At first, the title did not startle me, since there are plenty of others with the same name. Recaps of 10 episodes were on the page. The first paragraph illustrated how the series did not continue past season 1. I read the summary of the first episode for the sake of passing time. Episode 1. Joshua's father is a known and feared gang member. His mother is a helpless addict. She attempts to use their own son as a drug mule on a plane flight from Boston to California. She has hopes of making a profit by dealing narcotics to a major criminal enterprise on landing. Their son goes to CPS. He goes to a safe harbor for kids. The synopsis struck me as very close to home. Who wrote or directed the show was not listed, but it did state the air date. The month and year given matched the era when an identical set of circumstances had befallen me. The name of the center I went to was called Safe Harbor. I was too young to remember much, but the facts were precise. I gulped and tried to shrug it off as an unusual coincidence. I read the second episode summary. Episode 2. We follow Joshua on his 15th birthday. He goes to a juvenile detention facility for the first time after he attacks a teacher by throwing a desk at him. Although he missed, the instructor still presses charges, since he did not like the student much. He befriends a troublemaker on the inside named Ian. They escape, but not before a massive brawl with the other students ensue inside one of the facilities. It ends with 2 captured. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. It was uncanny to me how similar the events were to my own experiences. A slight dizziness overtook me, but I went on to the third, unable to keep my eyes from skimming. Episode 3. Joshua is free. Joshua decides to break and enter an old man's upper-class home after scouting the place for days. His goal is to take the many Rolex watches from the top drawer of the old man's dresser. When he enters the house, Joshua discovers how the owner did not take this vacation cruise as he planned. The man was asleep in his bedroom until Joshua wakes the victim up by accident. Joshua runs away. He gets chased by the homeowner outside, where the elderly male dies of a heart attack in the street. I felt my chest tighten. It was all true, but I had never shared that story with anyone before. It was one of my most guilt-ridden memories. I read the next 2 episodes. Episode 4. Joshua has nightmares of the old man crawling out of a ditch and choking him to death. He complains about the terrors to one of his counselors. He recommends a doctor. He ends up selling anti-anxiety pills after he does not like the way that they make him feel. A girl he asks out overdoses and goes to the hospital. While she survives, he feels terrible, but not enough to stop dealing. He takes his earnings and buys a PC. He takes lessons on how to breach other people's privacy from a group of credit card thieves he met in the mall. Episode 5. Joshua discovers the dark web. He uses it to hustle low-level street drugs. He later reads the headlines about how some of the people are getting arrested. He still continues to engage in illicit activity. I looked at the air date of episode 6. It was the 24-hour period I was living through. Episode 6. Joshua goes into the bookstore to poach their internet. He tries to make some money. He does not realize there is a man with a shaved head and a Carhartt t-shirt below him pursuing the sci-fi aisle. The stranger is actually an undercover FBI agent. The government worker has a microphone and a camera attached beneath his shirt. He is surveying for the perpetrator, even though he has not singled out who he is looking for yet. An arrest commences where they tackle, punch, and taser Joshua. They place him in handcuffs. At this point, my hand shook. I stood, gripped an Eckhart Tolle volume to appear less conspicuous, and opened it. I leaned my head over the railing to stare at the ground floor below me. A man who matched the description given by the article, he was standing right there. His t-shirt was baggy and hid what I knew to be a gun in his hip. He held a paperback in his hand. I pulled out my phone. I pretended to have a conversation with an imaginary business associate about stocks. I folded the laptop with my free hand and went down the escalator. I strode toward the back where there were stacks of hardcovers. I found an unsecured door and I walked through it. I was in a warehouse. Unopened boxes were stacked all around me. I did not spot any workers and I made a run for the near entrance. I sprinted down a wide alleyway between the building and the rows of motels. I passed an art gallery and liquor store before my heartbeat slowed. Along the way, I found a closed vegan restaurant called Valenti's Eatery. The place was black on the inside, but its neon sign still glowed. A picnic table sat on the lawn out front. I stationed myself right there. I opened the laptop again and connected to their free Wi-Fi. I scanned the rest of the story. The remaining episodes were all future time periods. I wiped the sweat away from my forehead as I read the rundown of the next episode. Episode 7. A labeled darknet market operator in the media. 3 of the 7 charges thrown at him led to convictions. This includes conspiracy to traffic narcotics. He gets out early after he agrees to cooperate with the different agencies. He becomes a consultant for cybersecurity awareness and social engineering expert. Following a keynote speech given out of town, he comes home. His girlfriend Olivia and her family have been murdered. My eyes strained and I felt my breath grow shallower. Episode 8. Joshua navigates her house. The walls had dried blood. Every corner is vandalized. Olivia's throat is slit. Her body is over the couch of the living room area. Her parents had socks stuffed in their mouths and deep stab wounds on their stomachs. Joshua calls the police. He's treated as the #1 suspect in the media for days on end. He's finally cleared, but the psychological damage is too much to bear. I pondered the words. Though I was still young, it is true that live meant everything to me. Episode 9. Joshua goes to a psychiatric ward. He stares at the padded walls as though they will converse with him. Detectives do visit him with the hopes of gleaning some kind of further information. They tell him that they know the aftermath of the massacre he stumbled upon was the work of an active serial killer. The murderers remain unidentified. Episode 10. Joshua leaps out of the window. He breaks his ankle. An adrenaline dump allows him to move across the field onto the nearest highway. He goes out into traffic. A long-haul truck careens around him and takes out a line of vehicles. He goes to the nearest lake, where he weighs his own pockets down with stones. He waits until nightfall and walks out into the abyss. The last image that we see is his hand breaking the surface of the water. Starlight glints on his skin before his fingers submerge below the surface. His last few swallows of water create pockets of bubbles, which rise to the top. I absorbed what the rest of my existence would look like. 4 black SUVs pull up and circle around me in the parking lot. Men in black suits and the undercover agent from the bookstore ran at me. Even though I did not resist, they still threw me on the ground. They dislocated my shoulder and kicked me in the jaw a handful of times before they cuffed me. I did get time reduced in prison after I agreed to cooperate to catch people like me. After my release date, I've tried to revisit that link without luck. I fail to understand how the article existed in the first place. I read how high-level stress can open up sites and portals into the unknown. I would blank on the latter, though sometimes I think it isn't for me to know. I don't want to give into what destiny has written for me. My escape from the bookstore has given me the confidence that I can change the outcome of the dark web's prophecy, even if only for a little while. Or will I only extend what will actually happen for a fraction of time? Fate, especially in our regards to our stories as individuals, is not written in stone. Will I tell myself that? This positive thought is the only thing which keeps me going. I should visit Liv's house now. She has not answered my texts or anything all morning.
This story goes back a few years. I don't recall the exact year, but it was probably between 2010 and 2011. I would have been 20 because I was living with my parents, but attending night college classes. Not really important, but it does help to explain that I wasn't a kid at that time, and I should have known better. Anyways, like a lot of people that have understanding of surface web versus the deep web, I was dumb and curious. There was this one guy in one of my classes that was obviously a basement dweller. Not trying to be rude, he just looked the part. I'm not going to describe him, you know the stereotype, but let's call him Jason. Jason was a bit antisocial, but he and I were decent friends due to our mutual interest in technology. I remember that there was one night that class let out early, and he and I went out to the lounge on campus and were just talking about random tech stuff. He brought up the dark web, and at that time, I wasn't really knowledgeable on what exactly it was. His explanation was pretty straightforward. It was a collection of sites and pages that were essentially hidden from the everyday user, and because of this, it was rife with illegal activity. At first, his explanation was enough to make me lose interest. But then he started showing me the pages that he used. He said that the main one was basically a bulletin board like 4chan, but better. He warned me that some of it was questionable, but there were sections where people would talk about philosophy, new technology, politics, and conspiracy theories. Now, I'm a bit of a conspiracy nut, not in that I believe in them, but that I love to read them and see what these people think. Obviously, some of them are completely insane, but there are some theories that are interesting and really get you thinking. When Jason told me about this conspiracy board, it caught my attention. I told him that I wanted to get in on it, and he gave me a look that basically said, "I don't think you should be doing this." I told him that I understood the risk and that I would take any precaution that he suggested. I guess this was enough to convince him, and he gave me a list of things to do when I got home in order to get on the site. He then gave me the Onion link to the page, and that was that. I went home and got on my desktop downstairs, and then I set up everything that he had said to set up. From there, I got on the bulletin and spent the entire night reading various conspiracy theories and paranormal explanations. Honestly, this was a highlight of the year. These were some of the craziest theories that I have ever read, and after a few days, I started feeling a bit more comfortable and started commenting on posts. For the most part, I would prod for more information, and people were shockingly respectful. I was genuinely surprised how straightforward the posts were. The people seemed almost decent, and most of them were fairly dismissive to the less than desirable theories out there, ones that were against certain races or religions. To be completely honest, this page felt more like a surface web page. They were mostly respectful and open to discussion, and the only reason that I could think that this was a deep website would be that they wanted a place to call their own and not get a ton of traffic. But then, it all went south fast. There was one post where the theory started in on something interesting, but then immediately turned their entire theory into a pile of racist drivel. There weren't any comments on the post yet, so I decided to comment and be a bit of an ass to this guy. Maybe the anonymity had gotten to me, but I posted something like, "Get your racist bullshit off the board. Your kind isn't welcome here." It was a basic comment, but I was satisfied that others would back me up and that this guy would get a hint and go away. But after a few minutes, I went back to the post to see if there were any responses. No surprise, there was. I opened the thread and there was only one comment from the original poster, and it said the following: "F off, David." I was a bit shocked. My name is in fact David, but I had no idea how he could have known that. I started thinking back to whether or not that I had maybe posted my name in another thread. If he had somehow linked me to that post. I had followed all of Jason's recommendations and covered my tracks in every way that he had recommended. But I decided to feign ignorance. I commented with, "My name's not David. Nice try though." I think that was where I made my biggest mistake. I shouldn't have challenged him. I should have ignored him and moved on. And he replied within a few moments, "Oh really? You're not David?" He stated my last name. "Living with Carol and Larry." He stated our last name. At 1706, he said our street name. "In Asheville, Virginia?" Attending, he said my college name, and working part-time at, and the place of my work. I was completely in awe. This person had completely gathered all of my personal information within a matter of minutes, and it was completely accurate. I was honestly sweating at the prospect of this dark web rando knowing exactly who I was. I decided that I would comment one more time and basically concede this conversation. I wrote, "You win, I'll shut up," or something like that. There may have been more panic in my comment than that. I went back after a few moments and noticed that his original comment was gone, and in its place was the following. Overwritten by Maud. To David, I'll remove your info this time as a courtesy, but it's best if you keep your mouth shut from now on. Also, get a better VPN. Your current one is leaking your IP. Apparently, the VPN that Jason told me to use had an information leak, one that he wasn't aware of, and one that gave away my actual location and registered information. I told Jason about what happened, and he laughed at me. He told me that it was my fault because I didn't do an IP check while connected to see if my info was hidden. He was right. That was part of his checklist. So that's my dark web story, and it's my only dark web story. Mostly because I never went back. This happened a couple years ago. I don't remember the exact month or year, but it couldn't have been more than just a few years ago because Bitcoin was at or near its peak. I used to spend a lot of time on the deep web, mostly on forums and things like that, but never on anything that was explicitly illegal. I know, that sounds incredibly convincing, right? Believe it or not, there are pages on the deep web that are good for entertainment. Some of them are in the gray area as far as ethics go, but again, not explicitly illegal. And some of them only become illegal if you take action on the page, I think. Look, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know. Anyways, I was browsing pages without intent to actually do anything on them and was just perusing through random onion links to see what interesting stuff I could find. And after checking out some random pages that sold things that definitely were not legal, I found a page that, well, again, definitely was not legal. From the start on the page, I knew that this page was serious. The name of the page was something like L.H. Oswald Solutions, an obvious allusion to Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated JFK. Honestly, seeing that made me chuckle. Something about using Oswald's name for the page was genuinely humorous. But after reading their information, it was pretty clear on why they used that as the name. The entire page was meant for users to pay Bitcoin and hire a hitman. The page explained that they had top-tier men working for them and price categories as well. The product started at intimidation and included things like arson, murder designed to look like a failed robbery, and had other tiers that were meant to make it look like an accident. The last one was the most expensive, obviously, and they gave scenarios on how it could happen, including hiking incidents, accidental drownings, and car troubles. Now, I had no intent in doing anything on this page other than reading what they had to say, mostly for entertainment. But then, I got to the bottom of the main page, and they had a full-on legal disclosure, which I thought was hilarious. It explained what actions could be taken if they failed and laid out their personal guarantee that they could find anyone and everyone without fail. Immediately after this was a small note at the bottom. We can find anyone and we can prove it. Click here for proof. Now, I know what you're thinking. No sane person would ever click that link, and no one could be as stupid as to click it intentionally. I didn't want to, but I had to. I had to know how they would guarantee that they could find anyone. So, I clicked the button, and the page switched over to a plain black site with a smiley face and an hourglass icon that indicated it was loading. After a few seconds, the hourglass turned into a check mark. At first, I thought that was it. It was just going to sit there with a check mark, and that was it. Then, much to my surprise, my cell phone started ringing. Obviously, I was freaking out inside, but I answered my phone anyway. I said, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was digitized, thankfully, and it basically said, "Here's your proof. Thank you for considering our services." A few times, and then hung up. I was actually grateful that it was a robocall and not a real person, but I was also terrified that it was able to find my number and call me. This was enough to tell me that they weren't screwing around and that I needed to never go to their website or question whether or not those Hitman sites are legit ever again. And here are the top comments from my last video. Welcome to Miss Creepy Tales Riddle Time. If you know the answer, feel free to leave it in the comments, and the winner gets to be featured in the next video. A king without a crown. I sound untruthful, but I can't talk. What am I? Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.